Hello ladies and gentlemen and movie lovers of all kind, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am your host, Brett Murphy, and for today's video it is going to be another cinema showdown. And the combatants are the Falcon and the Winter Soldier versus WandaVision. So these are Marvel Studios' first two original shows to premiere on Disney+. And I think it's fairly safe to say that they were both massive hits. However, they both took extremely different approaches to the Marvel formula. So, which one did it better? Well, without further ado, let's hop right into things. Round 1. Action. So with these two being superhero shows set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we can all expect at least a little bit of action. After all, we don't necessarily go to see these superhero movies on the big screen for the plot. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier open up on a very positive note when it comes to action, as its opening moments followed Sam in an exhilarating action sequence, involving helicopters, mountains, and explosions. And then we transitioned into a phenomenal flashback sequence that was actually one of Bucky's nightmares, following him once again back in his Winter Soldier days. And that sequence was just so dark and chaotic and hard-hitting. And hearing that Winter Soldier score once again from the movie just coated me in goosebumps. Following that though, for me at least, the next two episodes fell very flat in their action, as both of the major set pieces in episode 2 and episode 3 felt very cheap. They just felt very hollow and like there were no stakes. It gave me no adrenaline whatsoever. But that all completely changed in episode 4, where they delivered on numerous truly hard-hitting action sequences. Follow that up with episode 5 that was mostly a story-driven episode, but did open up with the handicap match of Sam and Bucky versus John Walker. And that was one of the best hand-to-hand combat sequences in the MCU in recent memory. As they all fought over Cap's shield, you could truly see the desperation in their eyes. And then you follow that up with an exceptional set of action sequences in the 6th and final episode. Now, where I said they took different approaches, I meant it, as WandaVision barely has any action at all except for in its final episode. And you could really chop that up into 3 categories. You had the Wanda versus Agatha showdown, you had Vision versus White Vision, and then you had the kids versus the military. And for me, the whole kids versus the military thing felt so tacky and unbelievably bad. I mean, this felt like early 2000s Spy Kids level stuff. Vision versus Vision started off with a lot of potential, as they were throwing each other around and smashing into things and using their forehead lasers to try and take each other down. But then it ends with White Vision having an existential crisis and flying away. And then when it comes to Wanda versus Agatha, sure, there were some cool moments. I liked Wanda finally using like her nightmare powers again. But then anything after that was just your typical, lights, laser beams, floating stuff in the sky, and just CGI flying around throwing like laser balls at each other and stuff like that. It just really didn't hit with me at all. It's just so CGI heavy, and Agatha felt like such a cartoony villain constantly spewing out one-liners that it really did not connect with me on any level at all. So what it really comes down to is that WandaVision kind of strayed away from the typical MCU formula and focused a lot more on mystery and intrigue. Whereas the Falcon and the Winter Soldier had some truly fantastic action sequences, at least in its first, 4th, 5th, and 6th episodes. They were all fast-paced, well-choreographed, and often brutal and impactful. Therefore, round 1 is going to have to go to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Round 2. Characters. In my eyes, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier had 4 main characters: Sam, Bucky, Carly, and John Walker. And I think that they absolutely nailed 3 of these 4 character arcs, because I felt that Carly and the Flag Smashers were total misfires. There was certainly potential, and I did like Carly quite a bit in I think the 4th and 5th episodes. She just felt much more human and like a real character. I understood where she was coming from with her ideology, and her goals seemed much more clear in those episodes. She felt like she could come back from that edge and still be saved. But then I felt like most of that was just kind of completely thrown away towards the end. Baron Zemo, another big character that we saw coming back in the promo material, and everyone was excited because he was one of the best villains in the MCU after Civil War. But for me, he fell mostly flat, and I was quite disappointed with him in the series. I mean, the guy was just so quippy and nonchalant and always joking around. And I not for 1 second got that impression from this guy in Captain America Civil War. And then you had Sharon Carter's return, and I felt she was very boring, and you could see that whole power broker twist coming from a mile away. Although one of the other major standouts in my eyes was Isaiah Bradley. and I just wish he had gotten more screen time than he did. His scenes in those few episodes that he shows up in were easily some of the show's best. And as for WandaVision, almost all of the characters were exceptional here. That dynamic between Wanda and Vision is the best it has ever been, in terms of both them being a couple and as individuals, as we explore primarily Wanda's mindset as she tries to find that perfect balance between being a good wife, a good mother, a good neighbor, while trying to deal with keeping this whole charade going, and dealing with the interfering outside forces, as well as a hidden malevolent presence from within. And we find Vision slowly peeling back the layers and coming to the realization of what's really going on and who he is. You see all sides of these two in this series, sides we never even really knew existed. And of course, Darcy, Jimmy Woo, and Monica Rambeau are all major standouts. They're all unique, funny, charming, and courageous, and add very nicely to the show's mix and help to spice things up a bit. Evan Peters as Pietro was always one of my favorite parts of those Fox X-Men movies, but I think both of the show's main villains were just okay. I was not a huge fan of Agatha Harkness. I just felt she was way too cliche and cartoony for my liking, and I actually preferred her as that sort of creepy mystery neighbor Agnes. Anne Hayward is just another generic military leader bad guy. Oh, and also the two boys, Wanda and Vision's kids, they're fine, they do what they're supposed to do. At the end of it all, both of these series did a marvelous job at doing what they set out to do. And that is bringing these larger-than-life characters down to our level, making their problems very real and their struggles rooted in reality. This round was seriously as neck and neck as it gets. And it really just comes down to personal preference on which character arcs you feel are more fulfilling. And for me personally, that means I'm going to have to give round 2 to WandaVision. Round 3, Story. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier focuses very heavy on themes and topics like race, PTSD, forgiveness, and legacy. Once again, we primarily follow Sam, Bucky, John Walker, and Karli. We follow each of them all on their own journeys, until all of their stories converge on one another, causing them to cross paths in various situations. And I loved the idea of following all of these characters. The various dynamics they had going, each of them had their own goals and their own paths they were going down. Like I said in the last round, I love seeing these larger-than-life characters brought down to a human level, even if they are human like Sam. For instance, seeing that Sam, the Falcon, has financial struggles just like the rest of us. Seeing that Bucky, the Winter Soldier, goes to therapy, something that many of us are too embarrassed to admit. That he struggles with PTSD, that he's socially awkward, seeing him try to reintegrate himself into normal life, and trying to find out who he is, or I guess, who he used to be. John Walker being a bit of an anti-hero, because in his eyes, what he's doing is right. I mean, the guy is a good soldier, but that doesn't necessarily make him a good Captain America. And seeing him before he puts on the suit and goes out to the public for the first time, that he's anxious, he's nervous, reminding us that he's just a guy taking on the mantle of Captain America. And like I said in the last round as well, Karli had the right motive, she had the right ideology, and I completely understand and agree with what she was going for. But like Sam kept saying, she was going about it in the wrong way. And that's why I loved when their stories intersected with one another, and they were able to share in these struggles and their differences in various forms. Like Bucky being so upset with Sam for giving up the shield, but then apologizing because he didn't understand what it was like for a person of color to take on the mantle of Captain America. Sam trying to stop Karli, but in his own way, using his past experience talking to veterans. There is just so much going on in this show, but it's given enough room to breathe so that it doesn't feel cluttered. WandaVision, on the other hand, took an extraordinarily different approach. That caught a lot of people off guard at first, but ended up being one of the most unique MCU experiences to date. The majority of the show had each new episode jumping into a brand new decade, and being directly inspired by many of that decade's most popular sitcoms. Now that's WandaVision at its surface level. But as we dove deeper into its story and picked up all of the little breadcrumbs along the way, we soon came to realize that not all was as it seemed. This show is very much so the Wanda show, as we explore her grief, trauma, and pain, and how she has used her powers to manifest this whole new world for herself, where she is the puppet master and she is just trying to cope. But as the show goes on and we begin to see the goings-on of the outside world, and are clued into the fact that there are more than just Wanda's abilities at play here, we end up with a wild and surprisingly human story. What really gives WandaVision the edge here is its creativity and originality. Again, at this point in time, it is a one-of-a-kind in the MCU, and its non-linear storytelling kept audiences guessing and theorizing week after week. Its ability to have us linger on every single word and image has been undeniably unparalleled. It truly was a whole new experience. Therefore, round 3 is going to have to go to WandaVision. Round 4. Which show had the better payoff? Now that we have just discussed the story and the paths that every character was going down, which show had the better payoff? So let's run down the Falcon and the Winter Soldier first. Sam ultimately decides to take on the shield and become Captain America. Bucky is able to let go of his past, and makes amends with those that he's wronged, completing his book of names. And is also able to own up to Sam, apologizing for being so mad at him for giving up the shield, saying that he didn't fully understand what it meant for a person of color to take on the mantle of Captain America. One of the many final scenes of the show where we got to see Isaiah Bradley's statue brings a tear to my eye every single time. Damn, that moment hits so hard. The Flag Smashers ultimately all get what was inevitably coming to them, but Sam still manages to deliver their message in his own way. John Walker goes on to become the US agent, and Sharon is revealed to be the power broker. Now when it comes to payoff for WandaVision, it gets a bit tricky, because a lot of the expectations for this show were just fan theories that were blown way out of proportion, which isn't fair to put on the show itself. Just because it didn't do exactly what you expected, thought, or hoped it was going to do doesn't make it bad or a letdown, you just did it to yourself. However, there were certainly things that they set up themselves that they didn't deliver on. At least in my eyes, they didn't pay off at all. Evan Peters as Pietro teasing an X-Men crossover, all for it just to be a boner joke. White Vision requests elaboration and then flies away into the midday sky. And Monica does virtually nothing with her powers except stop a couple of bullets. Again, these are things that they set up that I do not feel that they delivered on at all. However, it's not all lackluster. It is arguably the most emotional and heartbreaking finale in all of the MCU. Wanda saying goodbye to her boys and Vision gets me every single time. It is just so utterly devastating. But Wanda finally becomes the full-blown Scarlet Witch, gets her costume and steals Agatha book and is in seclusion. And I guess Vision is sort of back to life. I mean, he was given Vision's memory, so there's definitely the potential there to see more of him. And although Monica doesn't get to use her powers very much, we know that it is just set up for future projects, and she certainly does find her calling. While I feel both of these shows have their good and their bad in terms of payoff, I really just feel that the Falcon and the Winter Soldier delivered on exactly what audiences expected. It does a fantastic job at tying up all of its loose ends while also leaving room for the future. And I just feel that WandaVision was so 50-50. Therefore, round 4 is going to have to go to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Final round. Which show had a bigger impact on the greater Marvel Cinematic Universe? So which of these shows had a bigger impact on the MCU going forward? What ripple effects will we see from these two going through future projects? As we currently know, we are likely to see both Sam and Bucky back in a Captain America 4, which will star Sam as Captain America. We know that Baron Zemo is still alive, we know that Sharon is now the power broker, the Flag Smashers and their movement are dead. Oh, and John Walker as the US agent, but we don't really have any word on how that's going to play into the future just yet. Now we switch to WandaVision, and it's very much so a different story. Although all we know right now is that Wanda is going to appear in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But there is a key element that I just mentioned that was in that movie's title, and that is the multiverse. Because as we last saw Wanda, she is now officially the Scarlet Witch with probably all of her abilities. And she was using Agatha's book, and we could hear her boys in the distance of her mind. Which means it is very likely that Wanda is going to be the one to open up the multiverse and is probably going to be the villain in Doctor Strange 2. Which does shake things up just a little bit. White Vision is now somewhere out in the world, but he now has Vision's memory, so what does that mean for the future of that character? And lastly, we see that Monica now has all of her powers and is going with the Skrulls. Add to that the official title for Captain Marvel 2 is The Marvels, which will likely star Captain Marvel, Monica Rambeau, and the newest member, Miss Marvel, with her show coming very soon as of the recording of this video. So although the Falcon and the Winter Soldier put up a valiant effort in terms of changing the universe, or I guess I should say Captain America and the Winter Soldier, or what I would have preferred, Captain America and the White Wolf, since Bucky's whole plotline was to try and get away from being the Winter Soldier, but whatever. But there's just no denying that where WandaVision left off is undoubtedly, undeniably going to have a much bigger impact on the MCU going forward. Therefore, the fifth and final round and the crown is going to go to WandaVision. So that is all for today's video, folks. Be sure to let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with my winner. And be sure to let me know what you'd like to see for the next Cinema Showdown. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And if you'd like to see more content, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing that little bell icon. That way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And as always, stay safe. Thank you so much for watching. And that's a wrap. Hey you, yeah you, if you made it this far, just know I appreciate you, and while you're here, consider hitting that subscribe button.